Hey there, welcome to Farmcraft. Part of being a farmer, you just have to fix things. There's all sorts of equipment that you're using and it breaks, and it kind of forces you to become a jack of all trades because there's just going to be power washers and pole saws and all sorts of stuff that's going to break. So I'm going to go through some of my common fixes in this video. We're starting out with this power washer here. Okay, I was using my power washer the other day and it quit working. Just kind of stopped right in the middle of running. And when you try to start it, this is what it does. And when you try to start it, this is what it does. Alright, so quite honestly, that is more than it's done the whole time I've been fiddling with it. Initially, it wouldn't do anything, and I thought maybe it wasn't sparking. I checked the spark, I do have a spark. So I took this off, which is the air filter. And of course, that's your intake. And I sprayed some starting fluid in there, and it fired right up with starting fluid, but won't keep running. So that tells me there's a fuel delivery problem. Got to be the carburetor. And that's the same thing it's doing now. It's getting a little bit of fuel, but I probably have a clogged jet or something in there. So let's tear it down and we'll get this carb off of here. All right, 2 bolts. The carb is loose. I need to pinch this fuel line. I got a fuel line there. And they make little things for pinching lines that won't mess them up, but I just use vice grips with some Gorilla Tape on them. Seems to work okay. Alright, now I got to take these springs off and remember how they go back together. Oh, it's just one. That's pretty easy. Yeah, that come right off. Can't complain about that. Ugh. Look at all that crud. Huh. That's weird. That thing feels like it's being dissolved by the fuel. You'd think they'd have something a little more. Looks clean on the inside. Interesting that that rubber gasket was so bad. I wonder almost if that wasn't stock, because this gasket would go right on that flat. That's probably what was supposed to seal it. I bet you somebody added that. And just checking, it looks like the needle and seat are functioning well. So the needle's right there, and when this floats up, of course, it cuts off the flow of fuel and fills up the bowl to a certain level and then stops. A lot of times when you're working on carburetors, you may not actually find what's wrong with it. You just clean everything out and put it back together and you'll find that it runs. And it wasn't flooding. I guess it's possible that that needle could have some crud in it preventing fuel from entering. So I will go ahead and take that out. The way I usually get these apart, there's a pin here holding this float. I find one of these spring punches does a good job of getting that pin to move. So there's your needle, and that is just a solid metal needle. Sometimes they have like a rubber coating on them. This one, the rubber is down in the hole. You can see that red down in there. But what I'm seeing looks okay, and I don't see anything in the main jet, which is the brass one down in there. Let's blow these out and see if we see any evidence of crud. All it takes is a little tiny bit of something obstructing a passage, and it won't run. That just hit me, and I think it came out of the carb. I really do. Hard to say for sure. I do think that there was something in the main jet. That would certainly do it. So let's put this thing back together. So, you know, rebuilding a carburetor is not that exciting. Or cleaning a carburetor. This isn't even rebuilding it, but this is a common, very common thing. So it's something, if you're working on small engines, you need to get familiar with this. Tappy tap tap. And we'll see if just that one will seal. If it won't, I want to clean that up better. If it won't, then I'm going to have to make something, or, I mean, I could buy a part, but it's so much easier to make it when buying it. You have to research it, figure it out, either drive or mail order and wait. Yeah, I can just get some fuel resistant something and do it that way. Right. So the gasket between the carb and the block looks good. Before we get too far, let's put this fuel hose on and see if it's going to leak everywhere. No drips off the bottom. Say we give it a pull, see if it'll run now. So choke on. Well, there you go. Sometimes it's just that simple. Take the carb off, blow the ports out, put it back together, you're fixed. Next. I actually got this at an auction some years ago, and it's an air-powered grease gun. So rather than like having to pump, you just hit the button and the air pumps the grease. So it's just much faster and much easier. I'd really like for this to work, but it doesn't. So I'm going to pop this thing open and maybe we can figure something out. I didn't pay much for it. It was actually one of those auctions where there was like shelves full of junk and you were bidding on the shelf, and this was in it. I have no doubt that I came out very much ahead on that auction. So what do we have? Big spring. Shouldn't this thing be full of grease for this to work? Hang on. That seems to have a good seal. So air is going to come behind this and push this forward against this spring. And that is going to pump the grease down inside that hole. Well, that just came all the way out. That's no good. Could get a grease explosion. Interesting. This thing just unscrew. You know, this grease is very stiff. I wonder if this grease has just sat in here so long that it's too old. It's really stiff grease, and maybe it's just not able to be pumped by this mechanism. Really not much to this thing. I don't see why it wouldn't work. Oh. Alright, so this thing's so remarkably simple. I think now that I've cleaned out all that really stiff grease, I bet you it's going to work fine. So the way this works, this is your typical grease gun setup. Your grease tube's in here, there's a piston with a spring behind it, and when you push this handle forward, it's allowing the spring to push on the piston that's always trying to generate some pressure on that grease to try to push it out. And this is what's acting as the valve. So this is our little air chamber, and this is that big spring that's always pushing this way, so it's returning this piston to the back of the chamber. And that puts this rod in a position where the grease can push past it and get into this cylinder here. This is kind of like the chamber. Then when you apply air to this, it pushes this piston forward. The rod then extends past this opening and blocks, so the grease has no way to get back in that direction. And now we have 100 psi air with a big surface area pushing on this little rod. So you have very high pressure in here, and the grease has nowhere to go but out. And yeah, very simple mechanism. I really like this valve here because there's basically one moving part, and it's this rod that's driven by air pressure in this big heavy spring. And it could even leak a little bit. You know, grease is good at sealing things. This really should work for a very long time. Put this guy back together. That goes like that, and that. So if it doesn't work, the only other thing to check would be the actual switch, which is a possibility. It works. Fast and easy. Great. Alright, next we have this. This is the control for my cattle weighing scale. My squeeze chute has scales underneath it. They plug into this. This has an internal battery. You turn it on and it reads out the weight. Well, it's not working, and I think it's just that the battery's dead. The problem is this has NiCad batteries in it, and I priced a new one, and it's $60. That just seems absurd to me, so let me see if there's anything I can do. I've had this open before, obviously. So, interestingly, it says 12 volts DC here. The charger that comes with it is a 12 volt 2 amp output. And I bought this new, so this thing's not modified. And I've already written on this battery because I was confused by this. Right here it says 6 volts on the battery, and there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. I think these are like 1.2 volts each. So that's a 6 volt battery. Maybe this thing's able to run on 6 to 12 volts. I don't know why it has such a low voltage battery in there. When I put this battery on the charger, it will hold like 5 volts for a little while, but it very rapidly dies. I think that's my issue. So rather than paying $60 for a new 6 volt battery, let me open this thing up. Don't stab yourself in the finger. Ooh, quite corroded. They all have 1.3 volts, but this one here has 0 volts. There's no circuitry or anything in here. This is just 5 NiCad cells. So surely I can find a cheaper battery pack than $60 for that. So I was thinking I was going to buy the cells and maybe solder up a new pack, but buying 5 cells was $10, and I actually found a 6 volt NiCad battery pack for $10 on Amazon. So, alright, new battery pack arrived. So this will be an easy fix, but will require some soldering. You could do it without soldering, but especially something like this that's going to get kind of thrown around. I just think soldered connections are the way to go. Having Tried to fix things many times with out-soldered connections and had them later fail. I prefer to solder them. Okay, the only deal is it needs to plug in right there. And this plug, I'm pretty sure, is not going to work. It'd be funny if it did, but obviously no, that's not going to work. So, we need to put this plug on this battery. This battery's garbage, so we have plenty of wire to work with there. This battery, I want to leave plenty of wire, so we'll cut it right at the end. Now we just need to strip those wires back. There you go. Okay. Willing to bet that battery needs charged. Charging. Empty. Yep. Yeah, it's working. So I'm working on my pole saw here. This goes in, or that goes on to there, and the problem is one of these bolts broke off, and it won't stay put without it. I have got to get this to stay in focus. First of all, I've got to get this bolt fixed. Now here's the issue. I was thinking this was just going to be an easy fix and I wasn't going to film it, but this thing won't focus. There, see where that broke off? It's actually below the surface, and it's in aluminum. Normally I would try to weld a nut on that, but I don't think I'm going to try something different, I think. But this might be a bit of an adventure getting that out. So the first thing, this is aluminum, and I have found that heat works very well on this because the steel and the aluminum are going to expand at different rates, and it really breaks them free. I'm going to try a left-hand drill bit on that. Now that thing didn't break off flat, so the first thing I'm going to do is take a die grinder and try to get a center point in it that I'm going to be able to hit with a drill bit. Now let's heat it. And now I'm just going to try a left-handed drill bit here. I might go with a little smaller one. Did you see it turn? Started turning. Didn't turn much though. A little more and I'd try to weld something to it, but I don't think I'm quite there. I'm going to go even a little smaller. Now I'm going to go back a little bigger, and I'm hoping this is going to bite. Look at that. Love it. So rewarding when something like that works. I found the right size bolt. It's a slightly shorter one. I'm going to use it up here. I think these are a little more crucial to its being able to hold on to that extension rod. Okay, let's see if that works. It's working. Could run a little better. So this thing actually has last year's gas in it. I'll put new gas in, I bet it'll be fine. But that part is fixed. So looking back at the footage, I realized I didn't explain the left-hand drill bit that well. The idea is you want the drill bit to bite into the stud that you're drilling and unscrew it. Now obviously it's got to be a left-hand drill bit because your drill is going to be in the unscrew direction. If you use a regular drill bit, you're just going to, and it does bite, you're just going to be driving the stud in further. But there's a trick to this that I find works really well. In my experience, bits almost always bite when you drill and then go up 1 or 2 sizes. I have to put my drill on reverse for these bits. But if I just drill, it's probably just going to drill. It's not going to bite. Now, of course, if you're trying to get a stud out, you might want to vary your pressure and your speed and see if you can get it to start making your stud unscrew. But now I'm just going to go up 1 size. Actually, that might be 2 sizes. I didn't pay attention. But if you have a smaller hole in there and then you go up a little bit, it is really going to dig in. And maybe it's not coming across on camera. You can see it's taking a big heavy chip. It's really putting a lot more torque against me when you do that. So for this technique, which is one that I think you want in your bag of tricks, getting broken bolts out is just a fact of working on things. You're going to need to know how to do it. Have a set of left-handed drill bits on hand. There's a link to them in my Amazon store, but they don't have to be anything special, you know, just some left-handed bits. In fact, you could even drill your initial hole right-handed and then go up a size or 2 and do that left-handed and just use the left-handed one to bite. Works pretty well. It's gotten me out of quite a few binds. Remember the sledgehammer that I broke? Well, it'll break my sledgehammer. I tend to be pretty hard on sledgehammers. I could make another wooden handle. They always eventually end up breaking, probably because I abuse them. You know, I'm swinging at it when I'm tired and I miss and I hit the handle and snap, or just eventually the wood will wear out. I've had really good luck with fiberglass, so we're going to replace this with a fiberglass handle. First, I need to get that out of there. It's interesting, this head is actually symmetric. It tapers into the center and then tapers out again. So either way you put it on, it should dovetail in there just fine. Yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt to be a little more aggressive. Good enough. So here's this kit. It comes with epoxy, got 2 packages of it, something to mix it with, and then this sealant to seal around the bottom so the epoxy won't leak out past where you want it. And basically you just epoxy the handle on. Sometimes you need to do some carving in here to get it all the way on there. You want that fiberglass all the way to the top. I'd like for it to come up just a little bit more, so I'm gonna trim a little bit here. There we go. That's what I'm after. Wish it would center a little better. I put a cut nail, which has a taper to it, to center the head on the handle. So now we need to seal up around the base so that the epoxy doesn't leak out. So it comes with this butyl tape. This is the same stuff I used on my metal roof panels to seal them. Here's a sawzall to vibrate it. I know on Forged in Fire, whenever they epoxy a handle on, you know, it doesn't do well. But this stuff is not 5-minute epoxy. This stuff needs at least 24 hours to cure. And I've done this before, and this sledgehammer is going to last a very long time and take some serious abuse from me because that's what I do. So I wanted to show you guys, this is a sledgehammer, the first one I did actually. This was probably 20 years ago I replaced this handle. The kit that they gave me didn't have enough epoxy in it. Apparently the eye was too big. It is a very big eye, you can see. So I ended up, after I had put the epoxy in and realized there wasn't enough, I jammed a bunch of screws in there in a panic before it's set up. I look at it, it's kind of silly, but this thing still works. You know, it slipped a little bit. You can see that it moved, but the eye is shaped so that it's dovetailed in there. And this thing's worked for many, many years. In spite of doing a horrible job putting it together, it still works great. If you have an old sledgehammer and you want to make it into something that's going to last a long time, put one of these fiberglass handles on it. So there you go, guys. That's how a lot of my time is spent around the farm, fixing various things like that. And I hope you guys learned something in this video and enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.